Yeah, share my screen. Cool. Passing it to you, Genevieve.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming to our Lunch and Learn today, where we're going to be talking about the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, and we're going to be giving updates on what happened during round five, what is about to be upcoming for round six, and then we have some guest speakers kind of talk about some of their projects that they have been doing. And so, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Genevieve Gary, and I am the new Flood Risk Project Coordinator at Wetlands Watch. And I have a background in integrative marine science. And Ian is taking over when to move the slides, and he is our policy program director at Wetlands Watch. Do you want to say anything else, Ian?
No, yeah, policy manager. Happy to be here. All right. Explain to us who we are, Genevieve.
Yes. So, for those of you that are new or don't know much about us, we are Wetlands Watch, and we are a nonprofit based out of Norfolk. And our mission is to enhance natural resilience, bolster community adaptation efforts, and protect and restore wetlands through Virginia. And we do this through five of our initiatives, which are wetlands and public policy, communities, neighborhoods, living infrastructure, and Catch the King. Ian leads our public policy, and I lead our communities initiative. And this year is our 25th anniversary.
Woohoo.
Yeah. So, why are we talking about flooding? Why are we talking about this now? Flooding has been at the forefront of the news cycle, and we are seeing more 100-year floods. So, what can Virginia do to prepare for this, and what kind of funding is available to do so? And so here is just kind of a short breakdown of how we will be going out our agenda today. We will be talking about the round five awardees, and then we will be giving a summary on what happened in the round six draft manual that DCR put out. Applications are not open yet for that. And then we will have examples from Susan Bates from the Nature Conservancy and Ben McFarlane from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. And then if we have time, we'll have a short discussion and open it up for questions. So, just to give a little background, what is the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, or a lot of times people will hear it referred to as RVRF. So, in 2020, the Clean Energy and Community Flood Preparedness Act was passed by the Virginia General Assembly, which established the CFPF to be administered by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, also known as DCR. Around the same time, Virginia joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, and RGGI is a multi-state cap and investment air pollution reduction program that limits carbon emissions over time while generating revenues for the state through quarterly carbon allowance auctions. And when Virginia enrolled in the program, 45% of the auction proceeds were directed towards Virginia's CFPF, and then 50% of those proceeds were towards building low income energy efficiency and weatherization. And so since 2020, RGGI has generated over $827 million for Virginia. And while Virginia has not renewed its contract with RGGI since December 2023, the state budget allocation has provided funding for CFPF. And there has now been, after round five, $218 million to localities across Virginia. And we believe that another 75 million will be available in round six. And so, what does this look like? This kind of just gives you a breakdown of how the RGGI auctions occurred quarterly, and just just to show the amount of money that CFPF has received. And we like to break this down because we like to see where the money is going, because we like this fund because it is a preventative measure for flooding. And on the next slide, we have an updated graphic now to include round five for where all the money is going. So you can see how the table breaks down into the amount released, the amount requested by applicants, the amount awarded by DCR, and the percentage of funding designated for low income. So we've had around over 301 million released, and then we've now had 218 amount awarded, and this re results in about 68% that's been designated to low income uh, of communities. And now I will turn it over to Ian because he has done an amazing job of really crunching the numbers on what happened during round 5.
Yeah. So just high overview. This is preliminary. I have only done a little bit of analysis, but with 70 applications, 65 were awarded, 5 were declined. If you're taking that into terms of percentages of like, hey, if you do apply for this grant opportunity, what is your opportunity? What is the possibility of you getting it? Is a 93% chance of getting the grant based off those numbers. 61.7 million were awarded, broken down between capacity and planning at 7, flood studies at 5.5, but most of the money was going to project funding with 54.5 million. And then breaking that between what were low income priorities, we can see that 36.7 million or 54% of that round was prioritized in low income geographic areas. Visualizing this, of course, if you take it in terms of topics of what the actual applications were based off of, most of them were creations of new resiliency plans, which are separated from updates to previous resilience plans, with 21% being those new creations. Most of them, the second biggest category was H&H modeling, and then property acquisition were 7 of the awardees in round 5. And then with other applications going down below, looking at geographic areas, we're seeing more distribution across the state, though Hampton Roads does generally dominate. And then comparing between region 4 and region 5, these are counts of applications that were awarded. And so between round 4, which is in blue, and round 5, which is in red, we can see that Northern Virginia actually went up. West Central and Southwest Virginia also went up, and then Hampton Roads went down. But then if you then take a step back and look at funding between all of these, both planning capacity, studies, and projects, money is still generally going to the Hampton Roads area. And if you break this then one more time between how that was working, most of the money is still going to projects, which is what we would want and expect when we're thinking about this as the 5th round of this grant program. People have created the resiliency plans, they understand what their risks are, and now they're slowly going and doing projects funded ideally that were based in those resiliency plans when they were first created, which is showing that the program is working and that we are slowly moving forward with preventative action to mitigate against flood risk and damage. So then passing it back to Genevieve on the planning principles.
So I'm just going to give kind of an overview of what the code states on which the fund is supposed to do. The Virginia's code is what established the CFPF, and there are a number of principles that the CFPF must adhere to provide equitable support to the state's localities. So 25% of CFPF funding each round must be awarded to low-income communities. Applications seeking nature-based solutions score more points than those that do not. And the CFPF encourage alignment with existing plans that already are there with localities, such as hazard mitigation plans, comprehensive plans, and green infrastructure plans. And so the CFPF is the only statewide fund providing localities with equitable, stepwise funding to support thoughtful and connected floodplain management and progress towards flood resilient principles at the community scale. And so on the next page, we're just going to quickly overview of what the funds break down to. And so you can have planning and capacity building, studies, and projects. And I just want to note that when it says local resilience plan required, that has to be approved by DCR. And round 6 is not opened, but in a couple slides, we're going to talk about the draft manual and what we and a couple organizations commented on it. So on the next slide, we just have a quick graphic of what the matches look like and what the loan interest rates are for both low income geographic areas and all other areas. And then on the next page, this is something that we do in partnership with the Virginia Conservation Network, where we make one-pagers to help people understand where funding has gone in the past, as well as educate people on the most current round. And so we will insert a link later on a couple pages where you can see these on VCN. We are still currently updating round 5. We also have some links for approved resilience plans. And what this slide shows is kind of a range of the geographic size in which can be applied for and the amount of money. So these are from a couple previous rounds. So we have somewhere smaller, such as City of Salem, that was awarded 59,000, and somewhere like Buchanan County that was ended up being awarded over 380 $1,000. On the next slide, we had another one which was quite exciting that Wetlands Watch gave technical assistance to, and that's the Crater PDC, which for those of you, if you're not familiar, that includes 11 localities. And that PDC has a dynamic challenge of having to worry that's part in the Chesapeake Bay watershed and part not. And that plan was over $558,000. And then another exciting thing that came out of round 5 was that a Blue Ridge Soil and Water Conservation District was awarded $95,000 for a resilience plan, and this was for Franklin and Henry counties, which is located kind of in the west central. And this is the first soil and water conservation district to apply and receive those funds. On the next slide, we have another couple examples of the types of funded applications, all having to do with floodplain management and varying kind of in the scope and what the projects are, from stream restoration to using more nature-based solutions in other creeks, as well as combining with the resiliency plans that they had in place. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the manual, and why we brought up about the cost is that something that we're concerned with in the future on how DCR wants to break down the amount of money that is funded. And so now you can use the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund to be a match for projects. The applicants do not need to apply for a separate RVRF, but there is a caveat to this that we will talk about in a couple slides. Approved local resilience plans will now be valid for 5 years. And now the standard period of performance for capacity building and planning grants is now 5 years. And now on the next slide, we're going to specifically talk about the Round 6 manual and the common letter that Wetlands Watch provided. So we asked for clarification in the CFPF manual on whether our VRF match funding is available statewide or only to disaster impacted communities in Round 6. We will have a map of those communities in a couple slides. We also asked for more online transparency here that aligns with our ask for a better web page. And then we're concerned about a potential cap on resilience plans, given that there is a range of cost and that they are needed for applications for projects. And then we have provided specific feedback that DCR asked for in a memo. And another concern that we have is that they may potentially look at limiting the hiring and training to only low-income geographic areas. And we want to thank the other organizations for signing on to our comment letter for this. And we submitted this comment letter about a week ago. It's been 2 weeks. So that's kind of giving us kind of like a timeline of when we might start seeing the application, because they have to have 30 days. And so on the next slide, we have resources that I will put here in the chat shortly on where you can find the information that's on DCR, where we have been tracking on our website, where you can find different lists of applications that have been funded, and the locality award sheets. And I just want to mention that we are still in the process, both at VCN and Wetlands Watch, of updating these to align with Round 5 and Round 6. So now I will turn it over to Ian to talk about the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund and how that overlaps with the CFPF.
Yeah, absolutely. So clicking through this, the biggest difference between the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund and the Community Flood Preparedness Fund is that the intent of RVRF was towards parcel scale mitigation, whereas CFPF was targeted towards community scale resilience. And I will caveat that there is a big question of how this upcoming round will look, and that has to do with a change in terms of the interpretation of how the grant is going forward. So it is $60 million right now, and this is based off of the proposed draft manual that closed on, I believe, July 6th or 7th, so earlier in the month. Um, uh, it, this round is being called the Resilient Southwest Virginia Fund in terms of the RVRF, so is eligible for presidentially declared disasters in terms of Hurricane Helene back in 2024, as well as the intense storms in February of 2025. And so they took some screenshots of maps. There were no legends involved, but the context for these maps were that these localities are eligible and the only eligible applicants for this current round of the RVRF. The RVRF then gets broken down from that 60 million, 20 million towards communities, which can be grants and loans, 20 million towards infrastructure, which can be grants and loans, and then a final 20 million as a bridge grant to help costs associated with someone who got a federal grant, and to use that as a line of credit. This draft manual is only 8 pages, so there are a lot of questions in terms of how much credit is available, what are the interest rates. We don't really have information on that at the moment, but it does seem like when this is going to be announced that there will be a lot of money trying to help recover from Hurricane Helene and these February 2025 storms. Similarly, not on this slide, but the Department of Housing and Community Development also has the Virginia Disaster Assistance Fund, which is 50 million, also in the same localities based off of an email exchange. So with that 60 million and the 50 million, there's a lot of possibility for disaster recovery in these areas. Moving on ahead. Oh, I jumped all the way. Yes, and so thanks to other people that also signed on to our letter. We were the only people who commented on the RVRF when the round closed, at least in terms of what is available on Town Hall. Maybe there were emails, but in terms of that, we commented on trying to restore and reference the Commonwealth resilience planning principles of it being statewide and having disaster recovery also have a built-in resilience so that both the Virginia Flood Protection Master Flood Plan and the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan, this also coincides and kind of connects with disaster recovery. We asked for a full definition section, clarifying eligibility and equity, as well as specifying the funding categories because they were only a single paragraph of those 20 million. And then also there were no scoring processes or process if you're able to appeal if you don't get it, what the application looks like are all question marks. So then with that, we'll pass it over to Genevieve.
And so, yeah, we created this kind of graphic to kind of give everybody an idea of okay, which fund should I apply for? And it really does come down to CFPF is more at the community scale and our VRF is at the property scale. And I just want to note this graphic that does not have the caveat of what Ian and I just discussed about that this are the newest round for our VRF is really for those communities that have been impacted by flooding in the last year. On the next slide, we also have more resources for y'all, which are the CFPF trainings, and you can go on. DCR has hybrid trainings. If you actually go to their dam and safety calendar online, that's a lot of times they will post where they're going to have kind of in person or if they're going to have webinars on there. And then the other new thing that Ian created is we actually now have a CFPF at wetlandswatch.org email. So if you ever have questions about that, and this could include the RVRF as well, or the other funding mechanisms that we mentioned, please email that email address, and we'll be happy to answer your questions or put you in touch with somebody that could. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to our two speakers to talk about more in depth about some of the projects that they have worked on. And first, we will have Susan Bates from the Nature Conservancy, and she is going to talk about the town of Oyster.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So there were some topics that I was asked to sort of hit on, and one of them is kind of the timeline, the time frame it takes or took to do this work. So the overview is that we helped Northampton County write a CFPF grant in 2021 that enabled the writing of a coastal resilience and adaptation plan for that small community. The Nature Conservancy also got matching funds from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So we had a lot to work with there. And the plan itself was completed this past November, and we have subsequently applied for, again, both NIFWIF and CFPF funds, but funding different part of the same strategy. And I'll actually share my screen if that's possible in a minute and show you that strategy. So a few things to point out about this. It has been tricky in that, Northampton County, as most rural small communities, really don't have the capacity to, even know about these funding opportunities sometimes. And so it's been a lot of us communicating with like Planning District Commission, the counties out here, and then, truthfully writing their proposals and then helping them to submit them, because even the online process of submitting proposals is not sometimes, not something that they have done before. And so it takes a long time. And, this was 2021 it was round one of the CFPF that we got those funds. And, really, what we wanted in this plan and what we did was have it actually prioritize projects. And in this case, we were able to prioritize 5 based on our funding. And those 5 projects had 10% engineered design, cost estimates, everything that you might need in order to pull one of those projects out and apply for funding. And that's really how we wanted the resilience plan to set us up, was to not just sort of this, basic overview of risk and vulnerability of a community, but also some actual things that feasibly could be done. And because we had that and kind of got in the pipeline with them, we now have funds to move forward on a couple of those projects. The 5 projects that the community prioritized were an earthen berm and living breakwaters to protect the south side of the community that already experiences nuisance flooding. Raising the homes that are still not raised. So some of them were raised after Isabel, but not all. And the PDC is actually moving forward on submitting a FEMA grant, or to get a FEMA grant to raise those homes. And this project enabled that because the engineers who worked on it did the cost benefit analysis that's required to apply for those funds. Floating docks was another one, and then a new access road, because the access road that goes to the northern side of the harbor in this community is a low area that crosses a marsh and can flood. So, and the public boat ramp is on that side, as well as the research center. So really the plan has done exactly what we wanted. It's been really great as a blueprint for other communities. We used it to get CFPF funds for Saxis, which is a community on the Chesapeake Bay side of the peninsula. So I think you know, takeaways are that in a lot of these rural areas, you really do need someone who's familiar with grant processes and can really help to write and submit and also communicate. I did a lot of communicating with DCR about this project, even though like we aren't the Nature Conservancy isn't the direct receiver of those funds. And then I'm just going to show my screen because I want to talk about how we got this one project funded. If it will pull up. Here we go. Okay. Are you guys seeing a picture? A satellite photo? Okay.
Yeah.
Weirdly, my Zoom bar is right across the middle. So if I point to weird places, that's why. So this was one of the strategies to protect the south side of Oyster Harbor. The green is an earthen berm, and here, I think, are living breakwaters and some maybe marsh enhancement. And then the yellow is the bulkhead along what we call the working waterfront. And then here we propose some nature-based solutions to protect this part of the community. This part is already a living shoreline that the Nature Conservancy installed many years ago. But one of these, if you don't do both of these in tandem, it's not going to work because the water would just come around. So like if we raise the bulkhead but didn't have the earthen berm, we would still get water into this area. So they go together, but it would have been too big of a project to apply for one fund. And so we went after, and by the way, the funds we got were to do the 90% design to get us to the permitting phase. And so the green was all applied to NIFWIF, and then the yellow to CFPF, because even though the CFPF wants you to have nature-based solutions and you get ranked higher, they will fund gray infrastructure. And this isn't totally gray. It's not all a wall. There are some nature, like oysters and other things that we're going to maintain in there. But anyway, that's why we had to split it into two. And of course, NIFWIF doesn't fund gray infrastructure. And so the greener part of the project got submitted to NIFWIF. Both of those got funded this year. And so we are starting the process of working with the engineer to work on these plans. And I don't know if you guys had something else you wanted me to touch on or if people have questions.
Thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Susan?
Basically, like getting a community, you know, to trust you to move things forward for them. And we had a lot of communication in the community to do that. You just sort of have to get started, and you know, we're in the pipeline now and we have a very defined direction of where we're going. And so just keeping an eye out for those different funding opportunities is key in this particular project.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And now we will move on where we're going to have Ben McFarlane talk about a PDC's kind of take on this funding, and he is from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission.
Good afternoon, everyone. This will be somewhat brief, but yeah, I think you know, the CFPF is it's an interesting opportunity for local governments of all shapes and sizes in the Commonwealth to really benefit from a robust, at least till now, program that you know, in Virginia, it really hasn't existed to this level of funding. And so, you know, we've been able to take advantage of that, but you know, it's not just Hampton Roads. A number of communities and regions throughout the Commonwealth have taken advantage of the CFPF to fund a variety of different types of projects that really run the gamut. So just, you know, briefly, just, you know, just reiterate that the way that the law is written and the way that the grant manual is written is that, PDCs are considered to be local governments in Virginia. Generally, and unless it's specifically spelled out, that we are political subdivisions of the Commonwealth, and so for a lot of these types of programs, we're considered to be eligible applicants. In this case, we're eligible to apply for grants that are from all three categories: planning, capacity building, studies, and projects. I think one of the advantages of PDCs applying for projects, one is that we, as we do with many of the things that planning district commissions are active in, we can help avoid duplication of effort. When our localities are all doing the same thing, if we can do it, one, there's consistency there, but also, reduced costs overall, benefits of scaling analysis up in other projects to avoid doing, same thing over and over again, which may occur if we have separate localities doing their own applications. Not always the case, and certainly there are a number of times where it makes a lot of sense for for each individual community to do their own work, particularly when it comes to things involving infrastructure, local planning issues, anything to do with updating your flood insurance rate maps, things like that. But generally speaking, PDCs we can help just fill gaps where our localities don't have the capacity to do work. Now at Hampton Roads, we're one of the higher capacity regions. Our localities, generally speaking, have capacity to go after their own grants. And so our role is more in kind of just identifying those particular issues or items of concern where we might be able to really fill a need. But in other places throughout the Commonwealth, PDCs have a much more robust role in taking advantage of the CFPF to really kind of set the stage and build a foundation for their localities to benefit from. One challenge with planning district commissions and the CFPF is the way they've written the grant manual suggests, for many of our types of proposals that there has to be demonstrated compliance with or consistency with local governments. And so, whereas an individual locality, a city, county, or town can apply on its own, can submit a letter from their chief administrative officer. For PDCs, we've had to show additional coordination through, letters or resolutions or other sorts of, documentation that shows that our localities are on board with our application. That's a little bit of a frustration for us because generally speaking, and I just wouldn't necessarily speak for all PDCs, but from our perspective, generally everything that we do is designed to be consistent with what our localities are asking for, and so we would not apply for something if it wasn't already consistent with what they're doing. So that's more of a minor annoyance than anything else, and we've been able to address that successfully with our concerns. I mentioned before already that PDCs from across the Commonwealth have taken advantage of the CFPF over the 5 grant rounds. And here you can see on the slide, there's a list of those that have received capacity building and planning grants. And the ones with an asterisk are those that have applied for regional resilience plans. So, as we know, with the projects, you have to have an adopted and approved resilience plan in order to qualify for or to be eligible for applying for project grants. And a benefit for these regional resilience plans is that they can be done regionally, like we have with our hazard mitigation plans. But once they're adopted regionally, and then if the locality adopts that plan, as they do with the hazard mitigation plan, then that checks the box for eligibility. And if their projects are in that plan, they're able to go after the project funding. They don't have to do their own resilience plan. They can benefit from being a part of that regional resilience plan. You may notice that we're not on that list of regional resilience plans. For our communities, I mentioned before, we go where they want us to go, and there hasn't been so far a request from our localities to have a regional resilience plan. Several of our localities have conducted their own resilience plans funded through CFPF, or have used pre-existing work and plans to satisfy the resilience planning requirement. But to date, we haven't seen fit to go after a regional plan. It's not to say that we won't ever try to do that, but it's not the highest priority for our communities. But it is, for others, and I'll just highlight, several more rural communities, Accomack, Northampton on the Eastern Shore, the Central Shenandoah, Lenawisco, which points for anyone in the chat who knows what that is without looking it up. But then also, more urban areas like Plant RVA have also benefited from the funding. I think they just got funding for one in round 5. So exciting to see, like the different takes that our compatriots at the other PDCs, our sister agencies, what their perspective is on regional resilience planning, and then using the CFPF for that. But in addition to the capacity building, several PDCs have also looked at it for others, and this is where I'm going to highlight some of the work that we've done through HRPDC. In terms of technical studies, I was just looking through and crunching the numbers. Accomack, Northampton, our Hampton PDC, and also Northern Virginia Regional Commission have all applied for and received grants to fund studies, H&H studies, other technical studies, flooding, mapping, other things that relate directly to local floodplain management or stormwater programs or other programs that address flooding. And also the Middle Peninsula PDC has been successful in applying for some funding for projects, either through as the region or as the kind of the vehicle for a locality to receive project funding. And so really, the takeaway there is that for PDCs, we do what our localities ask and need us to do. And in this case, the CFPF really allows us to really do, to fit in wherever it might be appropriate. So for us, we've been fortunate at HRPDC. We've received 2 grants, well, 3, 2 that we've actually executed with DCR and VRA, and 1 that was just announced as part of Grant Round 5. 2 in Round 3 as part of the supplemental round. One of the things that we were asked to provide additional information, like a number of applicants, and part of that was that demonstration that our localities had signed on to our proposals, and so we were able to present a resolution of support from our board, unanimous support that demonstrated that our localities, our 17 jurisdictions, were all on board with these projects. The first one I want to highlight was a capacity building grant. Many of our communities are participants in the community rating system. And so we do a lot of work regionally to support our localities. And we wanted to look at different, tools or other ways, other things that we could do, activities at the regional scale that would be able, a locality that was in the CRS could then kind of take and, plop into their, report to ISO and FEMA to say, like, hey, we're doing this. We are a part of this regional activity, and it should count for our CRS credits. And we had a lot of good ideas that came out of that. That was a project we did with AMT, but also working directly with the CRS user groups. So another shout out to Wetlands Watch for that work that they do. And right now we're actually working on implementing some of the recommendations from that capacity building initiative. So that one's all but complete. There's some minor work left to be done before we submit the final deliverable to DCR. We're also wrapping up. We're making a lot of progress on our first technical study grant, which we obtained to fund 4 different deliverables related to supporting local programs related to floodplain management and stormwater management. So one of those was assessing the kind of current state of regulating hazardous materials and floodplains and other areas that are or will be vulnerable to flooding, looking at how climate change impacts will affect the performance of stormwater management BMPs in the coastal plain, and identifying some potential design modifications to those BMPs. One that we're still working on is estimating the costs of implementing higher stormwater management standards. And then the last one here was assessing the quality and the availability of H&H data for our localities to understand kind of where we have models already in place, where we have limited data, where we have no data, and how that might impact the ability for our communities to do effective compound flood modeling and planning as part of their CIPs. And then recently, earlier, I guess it was earlier this month or late last month, where we received notice from DCR that we've been selected for a Round 5 grant to support expanding our network of regional flood sensors. So we were able to obtain through a grant from the Department of Defense several years ago, funding to support a pilot network of roadway flooding sensors. This grant from the CFPF will allow us to expand that, more than double the number of sensors that we have on roads throughout Hampton roads. And so we're currently meeting with localities to help us plan that effort out. Looking forward to getting the contract from VRA so we can start counting all the time that Emma and Whitney and I are spending as match for that, because it's not eligible for pre-award costs, but we're looking forward to that one. And for our localities that are on the call right now, if we haven't met with you already, we are planning out the rest of those meetings here. So I will just say, it's been a really rewarding, I think, a really excellent program. A lot of room for improvement, but so far, just the type of projects that have been funded, the number of projects that have been funded throughout the Commonwealth, I think it demonstrates the need for this type of work. There are some minor frustrations, I think, that are unique to PDCs with the program that are not there for our locality members, but it's not something that we can't work through. So that's all I have for today, but I really appreciate the time to come and talk a little bit about it, and be happy to answer any questions anybody might have about our work or about just planning district commissions in general and how we work with the CFPF and DCR.
Woo! Thanks, Ben. Does anyone have any questions for Ben specifically right now that they would like to ask?
We have someone from Wise there. Fantastic, great.
Okay, looks like no questions for now, Ben. Everybody's shy.
I actually have a question for Ben.
Oh, thanks, Dave.
He wouldn't want to get away without a question. I know, he's smiling. In terms of the round 6 of the cap that they're suggesting for the capacity building, if you're doing a whole PDC, that cap is very limiting. So I'm just kind of wondering, and maybe the Wetlands Watch people have, if people are kind of applying for these things at a broad scale, like a soil and water district or PDC, how's that going to affect the ability to do that at such a large scale?
Well, I mean, I would say, a couple of things. One is that we submitted comments and we were opposed to the cap. I think if we look at just the average cost of resilience plans across the board, I think it's exceeded the cap, and the costs are only going up, right? So we've had several years of these projects. The $200,000 is not enough to do a good resilience plan, in my opinion. Not enough for a locality, an individual locality. I mean, I think you could probably meet the minimum standard that they set out in the manual, but if we're trying to support, quality planning at the local or regional level, that's not enough funding. And we stated our opposition to that. I would say that doubly applies at the regional scale. But even I think just in general, that the quality of the proposal should drive, should drive the, reasoning behind the cost. And we have seen in our region very relatively inexpensive plans, but also some very, robust planning grants. And I want to highlight, for example, the city of Newport News and the planning grant that they received, and the work that they're doing for master planning, for flooding, for stormwater management and other things. That is really going to pay dividends down the road. So we would encourage DCR to take a very, a broader perspective on the value of these plans and how they can be used to inform local decision making and investments beyond just what's in the community flood preparedness program.
Yeah, that's good comment, because it seems like the point of these is to have some specificity. So the bigger the geographic area, the harder it is to get specific on recommendations.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Well, thanks you guys so much for bringing that up. That is actually, we've entered into kind of our discussion time for the Lunch and Learn. And 2 questions we want to talk about. One is would a cap of $200,000 on a resilience plan limit anyone from applying to the CFPF? We'd love to hear back from you guys. And then another question we have, and feel free to put the answers or how you feel to these questions in the chat as well. Is that, so you have a resilience plan, what are some of the barriers you are seeing getting to projects and project implementation? Would anyone like to comment or?
I'll come off mute.
Okay, thanks, Susan.
Yeah, and comment because yes, we have a plan now for the town of Oyster. And there are a lot of barriers. So I mean, one of the big ones is we have to have permits to do the projects. And to get permits, you have to have engineered designs, and engineered designs are expensive. And we're, especially here, we're talking about a small community. It's very rural. We're not like, we don't have the importance that like a Hampton Roads with, hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about a community. It serves the wider community because there's a boat ramp and aquaculture facilities and things like that in the town. So it does have a larger purpose. But the engineering is just so expensive. And so like we were kind of on pins and needles wondering if our CFPF was going to go through, and then that's just for the design, and then the implementation is going to be even higher of a number. I had another one. I'll think of it and come off mute in a minute.
So I'll just add in there, I think to just reiterate some of what Susan was saying. One is the cost, and for some of these projects, they do exceed the cap. But I think, from our community, but I think, what we're seeing in Hampton Roads with the cost of projects, we see that we think of ourselves as being on the leading edge of things that are going to affect all of Virginia eventually. And so it looks like, all the money is going to Hampton Roads. Thanks Ian for that. That we're just first in line because we've already been wrestling with these issues. But when we think about the need for flooding and flood protection investments, it will be substantial across the Commonwealth. The timeline has been one of the issues that I think our localities have struggled with, that getting projects underway and making progress on them within 3 years, particularly, right now with crunches on capacity for construction, for permitting, like Susan said, that having it be a 3-year timeline with only 2 1-year extensions has been a significant challenge for several of our communities. And I don't think it would be, I think, good for us to, or for DCR to evaluate how the market is handling the demand for these types of services to inform the timelines that are prescribed in the grant manual. I will say also one thing I just want to mention, because I forgot to earlier, and Noel's on the line, but AECOM worked with us on some of the technical studies that we're doing. So between AMT and AECOM, one of the things that we have to do for all these grants is we can't pay for existing staff. So you have to either hire new staff or pay for consultants. And so we were able to match the grants with in-kind staff and with some cash contributions. But the consultants we worked with on these were key to making sure that these projects are worthwhile and getting the quality of work done that's going to help our localities in the future. Sure thing, Noel. Yep.
Thanks, y'all. And I think that's important to mention about, really making sure the rest of the state is prepared to deal with flooding. The Wetlands Watch team was in the greater Roanoke region last week, and we see that there are some counties that they have absolutely no capacity to do anything related to flooding. They are trying to keep the schools open. But some of those same counties are the ones that have this available funding through RVRF, but they don't even have the ability to get into that pot of money. And so that's something I think we could work harder at, is making sure, especially in these more rural areas, that when they get hit hard with flooding. And so if anybody just, and I just want to plug that we actually are having a CRS work group on Wednesday, and it's going to be over the Virginia Flood Master Protection Plan. And I'm going to put a link to the registration in the chat for that. We really want to make sure that people are aware that, the Virginia CRS work group, you do not have to be in a CRS community. That even though we have the meetings in person in the Hampton Roads area, that everyone is kind of invited to those, and we can help provide tools that can be used across the state. And yeah, Susan, what would you like to say?
I am really glad that Ben brought up that you can't supplant existing salaries. That's a huge challenge here on the Eastern Shore. The way that our county office works is that almost all of their people do not have just one job. And they sort of, and we saw that through funding for in round one that we got for the community planning in Oyster, they only got enough funds to fund like a part of a person, but you couldn't supplant a current person's salary. So it had to be a new hire, but then it's this really low salary for a new hire. And it's hard to get new people. Someone's not going to come to the shore, move to the shore for this job when it's connected to a 3-year or even if you say 5-year position. I mean, we're so out of the way, and we saw that our county did hire a person with funds from round one and round three put together. But then because of that uncertainty, because you'd have to apply again to get funds to support that position, that person found a job elsewhere, and now that position is sitting unfilled, and it was a really important position to have. So for our rural communities, it's really important to, I feel like, be more flexible with those rules because that's just the way they have to operate because there just aren't as many people or ways to ensure they can be kept on.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that would like to say anything?
I've got a couple things, Genevieve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, please share, Dave. Thanks.
Yeah, just a few things that I've learned from working in Pennington Gap in Lee County on their plan. And I believe this is more of a question. I don't know about the round six, but these small places, they can't even make the match. So if the match is waived, I believe the cap is 50,000 for the plan. Is that still true with the round six?
Ooh, I'd have to go double check that.
Yeah. Okay, I was just curious about that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is the role of VDOT in any kind of infrastructure improvements in rural areas because they're going to be controlling most of the roadways and bridges. And we just had we have a situation down there where um, the biggest drainage issue is a combination of VDOT and town infrastructure or lack thereof. And so it was really getting VDOT engaged early in these plans is, I think, really important because they're kind of a slow-moving creature in some places. But anyway, a lot of the solutions may involve VDOT buying into it. And then the third thing, I think these are good models we learned about with Ben with the PDC as like a really instrumental partner, and Susan with the Nature Conservancy. And I just want to say if anybody's in Southwest Virginia, Appalachian Voices is another NGO that's been very active with this, getting grants for some of the communities, the smaller communities. So having that kind of NGO partner for the lower capacity communities is just a great way to proceed with this program.
Thanks, Dave. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free, like I said, to use that cfpf@wetlandswatch.org email for specific questions, or if there's anything else, feel free to email Ian and I. We are about at time today for our Lunch and Learn, and thank you so much to Susan and Ben again for speaking and sharing how this grant program has been used for your PDC and the other communities in Virginia. And with that, I hope everybody had a good lunch. And yeah, feel free to come and hear about the protection plan on Wednesday.
Thank you.